Hi, I'm Sadie Senator. Welcome to my podcast, Inspirational Women in Biotech and Medicine. I am glad you are tuning in today so you can hear the wonderful story of Holli Kolkey. She is the Vice President and Head of Corporate Communications at Arcus Biosciences. Holli, thank you so much for sharing your inspiring journey with all of us.
Thank you for having me. My role at Arcus is quite broad as it relates to communication because that can mean many things. Really, I am responsible for all of the communications that the company has that is to the external facing world. So website, our social channels, the type of content that goes on those social channels, all of the different websites, press releases, or any type of communication that is outside or visible outside of the company. And then also internal communication. So that can mean a lot of things, but it's very specifically focused to communications to employees. So not necessarily how human resources would talk to employees about benefits and things, but more making sure and building and maintaining our intranet, making sure employees are informed about what's happening around the company or important news that the company is sharing externally. So that also can sometimes include some employee activities. I think maybe even we crossed paths last summer at one of our events that we had. So I oversee those things. And then also on the policy front, so that could be related to any type of government affairs or relations. In the simplest term, that could be lobbying efforts. We don't necessarily engage in those so much as a company right now, but there are community, like at the county level, at the state level, and then at the federal level, relationships that I maintain with organizations, and then also people who have influence within policies and laws that might be passed that would have impact on our business. And then the next piece is advocacy relations, and that's working with nonprofit organizations that provide services to patients who might be impacted by various types of diseases. And then also nonprofit organizations that represent the industry and the business itself. So like a patient advocacy organization would be like the American Cancer Society. I had dinner with them last night. And then an industry organization would be like bio or pharma, a big organization that actually represents companies that are within our industry. And then the final piece is brand. And that's what's our corporate brand identity and reputation. So that is the look and feel of the website, all of our materials, our logo, our color scheme, really like what is like the feeling and the essence that you get from the company, and how does that connect with our reputation?
Wow, that's so interesting. You do so much, like so many different categories there. So thank you so much for explaining that. And can you also tell us a little bit about what Arcus Biosciences is and what the goal of the company is?
Yeah, so Arcus Bioscience is a young biotechnology company, and for your audience who might not know what the difference between biotech and pharmaceuticals are, biotech companies are doing research and developing medicines or products that are founded in genetic information. So it needs to be protein-based, antibody-based, things that are organic, naturally found in our bodies and in living species. Pharmaceuticals are chemical-based molecules.
Okay.
So actually taking and using chemistry to, bring together, maybe you need some oxygen and you might need, going back to my chemistry days, but bringing molecules together, right? And actually creating like things from them. So biotech and pharmaceutical have kind of merged together. So why we say we're in the biotech industry, we also have pharmaceutical medicines that we're researching. So we're biotech and we're pharmaceutical. So sometimes people say biopharma. So I'll just start there in terms of the foundation. And with that, we are researching and developing both biotech or biologic medicines and pharmaceutical medicines, ideally to help cure cancer one day. And so what we're ultimately looking to do is within specific disease areas, types of cancer like lung cancer, colon cancer, stomach cancer, to help people who have that disease live longer than they would on the medicines that they are currently available to them now. And maybe one day that longer is long enough to be called cure.
Wow. Thank you so much for setting such a clear picture of what Arcus does. And also, yes, that distinction between biotech and pharmaceuticals is super interesting. And I knew a little bit about it, but that made it very clear to me. So thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit about your academic background that led you into biotech and I guess the other positions that you've had in the past that have led you to Arcus?
Yeah. So my degree is in journalism. And
Oh, okay.
actually, in most accredited journalism programs at universities, um, there are 4 areas that someone can go into that fall under journalism. One of them is news writing, right? Like writing for a newspaper. There is broadcast journalism, so TV, could be radio also. There is editorial or print, and that's magazine style of writing, because magazine style writing is very different than newspaper writing. And then there is public relations or PR, which is my emphasis in journalism. Some journalism programs actually consider lobbying, which I mentioned to you before, talking about policy work, lobbying as a form of journalism as well. So all of those areas of work require a really strong foundation in writing and understanding of the written language, and I think most importantly, storytelling. So in public relations, I like to say in the simplest way, because people say, well, what is PR? They think of it as like a publicist, right? That you've seen on,
Yeah.
The Devil Wears Prada or something like that. And that is part of it, in terms of being a spokesperson for the company and getting publicity and talking to media and having big events. But a lot of it is also the storytelling and crafting the messages for a company or a product. So what is the company or the product? Why does it exist? What problem does it solve? Why do people care that it
Yeah.
exists? Why do they need it? So someone needs to think about what is that story as to why something's important to them. And if you think about certain brands like Apple, not only do they have like great branding that's fun, but there's a whole experience that goes along with it. And when you think about Apple, you think about innovation, you think about first, and someone, crafted all of that, so that you, the consumer, think, gosh, that's a product that I want to buy or I want to own or I want to be associated with.
Definitely. Wow. Okay. I did not know that much about journalism degrees and what PR was. So that's very fascinating. And the Apple example, too. Like, that just makes it very clear to me. So that's a really cool background to have. And how have you used what you learned getting your journalism degree in the different positions that you've held throughout your career? And also, since you're at Arcus right now, specifically at Arcus, how has that come in handy? I know you've touched on it a bit with the lobbying and stuff like that, but
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that even studying journalism and public relations specifically in school, and I did an internship my senior year of college, and I still didn't fully understand what it was. And then I took my first job out of college at an agency. So sort of like people go to work at advertising agencies, there's PR agencies, and all the big ones are in New York, just like in advertising and all the creative. And what's really cool about that is you get to work on a lot of different companies. So you learn about different situations or issues that companies have. So in the early part of my career, I got to work. I just happened to work at a biotech company, an agency that specialized in biotech companies. So I got to work with biotech companies that had maybe just gotten like their Series A or Series B financing, and they needed someone to actually like create their story and put together the corporate presentation so that when the executives would go to meet with investors, that they had structure to be able to say, this is our company, this is why we exist, this is what we're hoping to accomplish, this is the unmet need, that we are addressing, and then here is like the financial incentive to you, investor, if you invest in us. And that was actually really great just to learn the business overall and learn the language, because there's a whole vernacular in medicine and in every industry, and acronyms that I had to learn. And it also taught me a little bit about the financing and the business side too, right? So it's not just like, what is how do you put together like a story or a narrative for a company, but what resonates with an investor, or with someone in the media that you want to write about your story to create that publicity so that there's more awareness about it and then more people want to invest in it. So I got to do that, but then I also got to work on this really cool dermatology product that was for this like tiny little company called Skin Medica. And it was like an anti-aging serum that you would put on your face. And it had a really interesting origin because it had been derived from live skin cells. And that had been, removed from a person, and that they had just continued to like generate and grow those cells and, in a sterilized way, like in a dish. And it was intended originally for burn victims that like after burn, you could put it on and it would help your skin regenerate. But that could also be great for women who want to stay young. And they, gave me this project to pitch the Oprah Winfrey Show, which isn't around anymore, but everyone knows how
Yeah.
amazing Oprah is. And it
Wow.
got selected to be on the show. It was like
That's
my
amazing.
claim to fame when I was like fresh out of college. And I wrote sort of a provocative, what's called pitch letter to the producer of the show with like the background of like where the cells came from and why this was, kind of like interesting. And we had a celebrity doctor, who treated a lot of stars in LA, who was willing to come on the show and talk about it. And so they picked it to feature on the show. And like a whole, 10-minute segment among like Oprah's favorite things. And so anyway, that was sort of my claim to fame then. And then what was really neat about it is we had to prepare for like the influx of interest. So we had to work with like their IT teams and like their web team to make sure that it could handle the traffic that was going to like go to their website to buy the product. So that was really fun. That was like the total consumer side and experience of it, like totally separate from the very like corporate side of things for like a startup company. And then I had this one other client that actually made tests for STDs. And that's like a hard thing to call people up about and trying to get them to write them, kind of
Definitely.
awkward and uncomfortable. But their big customers, like the company, like not only made the test, but they made the instruments that like ran the test, like these big machines that ran the test to know if people were like positive or negative for whatever STD. And their biggest customers who bought these like instruments were the health centers at universities, and then also public health clinics, and then jails, because obviously like when people are in jail and juvenile hall, they like still need medical care. And so I worked on this campaign, talked about like the importance of like STD testing and like how easy it was, and they could go to like their health center on campus to get tested for free. And then we gave that campaign, like all of the posters and the materials, away to the schools for free to use. So what did that do? One, it increased STD testing on all of those college campuses, which means the company selling more tests. And
Wow.
then
Okay.
also their sales reps when they were going to like new universities or campuses, could say, if you buy this instrument, we're also going to give you this free campaign so that you can like market, and it's important for kids to get tested and like be healthy and all these things. So it ended up being like a sales tool also. And that won a bunch of awards, like in the PR industry. And that was actually really fun to work on. So I just say, like, I give you those three examples from early in my career because they're so incredibly different paths, but they're all part of the biotech industry. In terms of the
Yes.
work. So you've got like the very corporate communications, you've got like the disease education piece of it, like with the banned ping pong program and public health. And then you also had like the pure like consumer advertising, like promotional type things. And working on the consumer side is really fun too, because you get to work with celebrities. I mean, I've worked with a lot of celebrities over the years. Morgan Freeman, like so, so many,
Wow.
Deepak Chopra, who would
That's
people
so
know?
fun.
Um, yeah, Bradley Cooper.
Wow. Oh my goodness. So many people.
Yeah, so I just give you a little bit of that background, but getting back to kind of like the origin of your question, working at an agency gave me really broad experience. And then from there, I moved what they call in-house, and that's when you like leave agency and you work on lots of different clients and get lots of experience, dealing with different things. And then you go and you work for one company like Arcus. And I worked at Genentech first. And I was there for 10 years, and had increasing roles of responsibility. And there I got really incredible experience doing more of the types of work that I explained to you before, with disease awareness and fun consumer stuff, working with celebrities and corporate communications. But I also got really great experience on something called issues management. And that is when you are at a big company, say there is a lawsuit against the company, or there's a Department of Justice investigation into your marketing practices, or a patient doesn't qualify for a clinical trial and they're posting on social media that you're killing them because they don't have access to the study, or things like that. So working on all of those things and learning, like, as a company, how do you handle those situations in a very like transparent, and very transparently, obviously like honestly, with those situations, certainly in situations with patients with great like tact and compassion, right? Because these are people who are dying of cancer or are very sick and they just want to be better, right? And so there's a reason maybe that they didn't qualify for a clinical trial, or maybe the medicine they want would actually harm them, right? And so it's like then working with their doctor, to help them have a solution, which may not always be something that the company can offer. So I got a lot of experience working at Genentech over the years, with increasing roles of responsibility. First, being responsible for one medicine, and then, like a whole portfolio of medicines. And then ultimately I was responsible for like, I had a globe, and I was in the United States, but I was responsible for a whole like, our medicines globally. And I had a team that was in Switzerland, and I had a team that was in China, and then I had my team in South San Francisco. And that was a whole different area of experience because, we're talking about like the work of biotech and what is like PR and communication, but a big part of your job, especially the more senior you get, is mentoring and coaching your team. You actually don't really do the work so much anymore. It's your team's opportunity, the people who work for me, to like learn how to write the press release, or to learn how to interact with a celebrity, or to deal with some issue. And I'm the coach behind the scenes. What was fun about Arcus and different than Genentech was that it was a small startup company that didn't have any kind of foundation or infrastructure. So at Genentech, it's a huge company. They already had an intranet that people managed, and they already had a website, and they already had social channels, and like this whole machinery, right? That's like already in place, where you just, plug into like that area of expertise or whatever your job is. But going to Arcus, I got to build it all from scratch. Like, there was no intranet. I built the intranet. and worked with employees on like the type of content that they wanted. And we tried to make it very like Facebook-like. So it's like very democratized. Anyone can post on it. It's not like controlled one-way information.
Mm.
And built the team that I have now, that the small team that I have that works with me, established all of the relationships with the advocacy organizations, did the website. So, and going through all the design concepts and working with the photographers and doing the photo shoot and writing all of the copy that's on it and all of that. And then meanwhile, doing all of like the communications and the press releases and the news for the company.
Wow. You've done so much. That's so interesting. I did not know, or coming into this, I have not known a lot about journalism degrees, PR, and all the stuff that's involved in that. So seeing all the different branches and how you've used that degree and how you've used your interest to go into so many different spaces is actually fascinating. So wow. And kind of,
Actually, I know
yeah.
someone, like some schools, it's interesting, like, if people are interested in going the PR route, there are some like schools that will do it under a communications degree instead of
Mhm.
journalism. It just depends on the school. And actually, like I know USC, I think they do PR under communication, and they actually have a biotech emphasis. So people who specifically
Wow.
want to go into like biotech and healthcare PR can like do that specific track.
Wait, that's so interesting. Okay, this is a new root of biotech that I haven't learned of yet, so this is amazing.
Mhm.
Very fascinating. And, other than getting a product on Oprah, what has been the most rewarding part of your job or in your career so far?
Hmm. Um, I think some of the programs that I have put together have made a real difference for like patients and society. So, there's probably some like individual examples of where, I interacted or built a relationship with like an individual patient or a family that, I hold those really dear and I still keep in touch with those people to this day. And the ones that have passed away from cancer, I still think about them often. So that's kind of just a general thing that is intangible in a way. Um, and then the programs that I've done, there's two, but one in particular that's called Cancer Screen Week. And that was something that I and my team put together with the American Cancer Society and Stand Up to Cancer and a little company in the Bay Area called Rally Health. They're owned by United Healthcare. And the goal, what we basically did is we identified a week in December that's dedicated to raising awareness about cancer screenings. And it's all based on guidelines, but to basically, educate people that, at age 40, women should start getting their mammograms. So if they haven't had one, this is a reminder to schedule your mammogram appointment, especially at the end of the year when people usually, have the ability and they've maybe paid all their copays for insurance already that year. And so it's not going to really cost them anything. Or at 45 to get a colonoscopy, or how important it is every year to go to your dermatologist and get your skin checked for skin cancer or cancerous moles and things like that. And really the goal of that program was that if more people got screened earlier and their cancer is diagnosed earlier, the earlier it's caught, the earlier you can cure it. So like if you catch it really late, you probably can't cure the cancer. And then, at some point you will die of that cancer, unfortunately. So you want to prevent that, right? You want people to get diagnosed as quickly, as early as possible so that you can treat it and cure it, and then they can have long, happy lives. So I really liked the program because it was altruistic, from a company that made cancer drugs. It was to say, look, get screened. We don't want you to need our drugs. We would rather you don't need our drugs, right? And we were actually able to move the needle in terms of screening rates in the early years of it. I mean, then the pandemic happened and then no one got screened for anything. So I think that,
Mhm.
the program is still digging out of that. But prior to the pandemic, we really saw like measurable increase in cancer screening rates.
Wow, that's amazing. Very impactful and sounds very rewarding. And then kind of moving into a gear just about lifestyle and balancing work and home life. I guess like what does the average day look like for you, and how do you maintain a healthy work and life balance?
Yeah. So I want to say, work-life balance, once you get to a certain point in your career, I think work-life balance is really the responsibility of the person. I know a lot of people who constantly running a million miles a minute and have no work-life balance, but in all reality, they choose that. And I think, there's a way to work smart and efficiently. And some people are really good at working it efficiently, and some people aren't. I will tell you, for like your young listeners, fresh out of college, expect to have no work-life balance. I mean, that's just how it is. Like, you have to put your time in. You're gonna be 22 or however, you go to maybe grad school or whatever, but you're in your 20s, you're gonna work like 12, 16-hour days, and you're gonna do that for probably 3 to 5 years. But if you stick with it, you're going to, you know, you're going to learn a ton and you're going to advance very rapidly. My work-life balance today is decent, in the sense that I do try and work really smart. I do try and, share work with my team. So sometimes, like, if they're really busy with something, I might take on that work for them, even if it's like their job to do it, even though I'm the boss. But like, at the end of the day, we're a team, and like, you just need to get stuff done.
Definitely.
And then sometimes vice versa, like I need help and they can pick up and help me with something.
Okay.
Um, I would also say that what's really important, once you get to a certain point in your career, is like making sure that you carve out time for yourself. And that can be professional development, if you want to take other classes and learn about other things, like to advance yourself in whatever career field someone goes into. It could be for people who have children and need to, get their kid to and from wherever. And I think since the pandemic, we've all had a little bit more flexibility,
Yeah.
which I think really helps with work-life balance, because it's a lot easier to work like a 10-hour day if you can take a break for an hour or two in the middle of the day or something like that, right? Or you're doing it in starts and finishes. There are some people like me, I like to be on email by like 6 in the morning, and then I like to be done earlier in the day. And
Yeah.
then there are other people who maybe don't want to start till 10 in the morning, but they're on their email at 11 o'clock at night. Right. And it's just kind of like learning those different styles. In PR, the one thing I will say is you can never fully turn off, because I am like the company spokesperson. So if there were ever an emergency, or if a reporter contacted us, less so at Arcus, but at Genentech, it was a big company.
Mhm.
There are oftentimes the reporters on deadline, like news happens 24 hours a day, because you don't know what
Yes.
time zone they're in, especially like they could be in Europe and they don't care that you're in San Francisco. So my phone is always on. Even when I'm on vacation, I'm checking email. And I'm never not working. Like, it would be very unusual to like not look at my email all day long, or to not be on my computer. And maybe it's only for 30 minutes, and that's fine, right?
Yeah,
But
definitely.
you're always on and you're always connected in this
Okay,
field.
that's very interesting. And definitely specifically for you having to be on the email or have time on your email every day and stuff like that, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's interesting to see that type of work-life balance and how it's very personalized for each person.
Mhm.
And then also kind of moving backwards a little bit, but like have there been any challenges that you faced in your field or in the field of biotech that you've overcome or have been meaningful for you or that you still think about while you're working?
Yeah, I mean, the world has changed in the 20 years since I've done this. When I was first starting my career, well, I'll say in general, biotech today is still very male dominated. You look across the board and there are very few female CEOs. The executive teams and the board of directors are still heavily or predominantly male.
Mhm.
When I was, early in my career, there were no women, in roles. And so being a young woman, especially in a PR role, there's definitely sexism, um, for sure. And I mean, I remember being at a investor conference and just walking up to someone to be friendly. I was, my boss had told me to go and network. So my goal was just to network, but they took it as, here's a young woman talking to me. She must be hitting on me. And
Yeah.
like nobody, no, thank you.
Mm.
But that used to happen a lot. And so I think, as a woman, it's always in my mind to, be very clear about like the professional line of things. I think it's just because of the field we're in. I imagine that tech is probably like that too. But then there's probably other industries like beauty and fashion that are not that way at all.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that's something that I think about. And then I think the other thing too, and how to say this in a way that maybe makes sense, but it's like really like learning your place within an organization. And that's, you learn among your group of friends, like what's your role? When are you the one that gets to talk, right? Like,
Mhm.
are there certain situations where you're like, ooh, I know in this group, I'm not saying a word, right?
Yeah.
Or I know here, like something else. Well, you have to learn that in companies too. And in each company, your role is different. And that's what people say is like politics inside of an organization. But I think that is something that everyone young in their career really has to learn. Like, do I go to this meeting? Is my role to keep my mouth shut, or is my role to speak up? And if I speak up, how hard do I push on my point of view? And how do I
Okay,
do it in a way
definitely.
that's not insulting to other people, right?
Yeah.
I think those skills are hard for anyone to learn. And I think certainly for me, being early in my career. And also, um, I think when people come out of college, and I certainly felt this way, especially working at an agency where like you have clients that expect you to be the expert and to know things, I felt like I always did need to know the answer. And I wasn't comfortable saying, I don't know, or I wasn't comfortable saying to the client, oh, tell me more about that, or, teach me your science in that way. And so I think I probably very early in my career had some missteps there too. So I would impart that wisdom to young people that you just really don't need to have all the answers. In fact, I actually think you look smarter to say, I don't know, or tell me more about that to learn.
Okay, definitely. That's great advice. The tell me more about that. That's something I'll keep in the back of my head. I really appreciate it. And then kind of going off of that, do you have any more advice for young women who are interested in the field of biotechnology?
Yeah. Biotech in general or like biotech PR and communications?
Either biotech PR and communication, since that's your specialty, would definitely, that's a great way
Yeah.
to go.
Um, so I would say, well, if you want to work in biotech in general, it's very education snooty. So like where you go to college matters, sort of like in finance, right? There's just certain industries where there's an elitism about like where you went to school. So I would
Mhm.
say, the best possible, school that you can get into. And if it doesn't even have to be your undergraduate, because sometimes that doesn't matter. It's like if you go to a great grad school, that's fine. And you don't have to go to a
Yes.
top undergrad to get into a great grad school. Um, so I think that makes a difference. I would say intern, do internships for sure. I know you did one last summer. I would say, throughout college and after college to learn various different roles in the biotech industry and make sure it's something that people like. You just learn that from, doing internships and learning the different roles. Um, I would say specifically for biotech PR and communications, probably the best place to start is at a PR agency that specializes in that because you will learn so much. They say that a year at an agency is like 7 years in-house. And it's really true because you have so many different clients and you're exposed to so many different situations and scenarios. So you learn so much in a short period of time. So I would say that's the place to start out of college is to go to a PR agency. But the best way to get in is to intern before you graduate because it's very competitive. In PR, biotech industry pays the best of all industries. Um, so, I think that is one specific, reason why people like to go into biotech or want to. And then the one thing actually I haven't talked about at all, because it's not really a big part of my role, but investor relations. That sometimes can cross over with like a PR and a communications role. It's very financially focused, and the career path for a lot of people who do investor relations, which is like interacting with the investors of a company or like trying to get new investors or new investment into the company. Sometimes that role crosses over with communications also, or you work hand in hand with the communications person, like craft that narrative about why someone should invest in the company. And that background is a little bit different. Sometimes people come from like investment banking, or they might come from a financial background and then have to learn the communication side. But that career path can be then going on to be like a chief financial officer or similar. So that's an interesting career path too that can kind of cross over.
Yeah, that definitely is interesting. I got to work a little bit with investor relations during my time at Arcus, so that was super fascinating.
I think you're really smart to be doing this podcast. Not only, are you learning about all of the different aspects, but what you're also doing is you're building a network.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to tell us about yourself and educate us about your career path. So thank you.